Okay, joining us now, Dr. Rob Lindsted. I have an article that I sent him. I said, I want to comment on this because this is one of my favorite topics, and that is this one right here. The biblical red heifer could bring million visitors to Samaria. You remember last year they brought 5 red heifers from Texas to Israel. This is over in the book of Numbers, and it talks about what you need in Numbers chapter 19 to take the perfect red heifer and then to offer as a sacrifice and mix, I think, the ashes with water and purify the temple. They just need a temple. They got the heifer, they got the instruments, they got the robes, they got the Levites. Why is this important? Because this is one of the markers on where we're at on God's prophetic calendar. So you should be watching for it. But there's also tension in Israel between Christians, evangelicals, and Jews. So I wanted to visit quickly with Dr. Rob Lindsted. Dr. Lindsted, welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be with you tonight.
Let's go to this one real quick. Biblical red heifer could bring 1 million visitors to Samaria. Apparently, they're going to put this beautiful animal on display. Tell me about it.
Well, as you mentioned, there's 5 of them that have been shipped from Texas to Israel because you can take 5 household pets, so they're called pets. And they actually have them stored in 3 different locations. Now they're going to bring 3 of them together into ancient Shiloh. Shiloh's a real important place because remember, that's the place where the first temple was located after they wandered in the wilderness. And it's also pretty unique because like on our last tour, we met with Dr. Scott Stripling, and we were at ancient Shiloh the very morning that they discovered that they found the 4th corner of the ancient temple there in Shiloh. We're talking some building that was, there, let's say 3,000 plus years ago. And they also found the gate of the city and the well. So this has become a really pivotal place because it shows Jewish occupation of Shiloh and that whole region around there that's in such controversy about who really owns that land. Well, it's definitely Jewish because Jewish writing, Jewish temple, Jewish gate, pottery has Hebrew on it. So this is the site that they've chosen to mature these heifers. They're keeping them in 3 different locations now, 2 locations, but separating them because they're so afraid that someone might try to kidnap them. Even the Arab people say whoever has the ashes will control the world. And so wow. There's a political significance to it as well as a religious one. They say that the heifer needs to be 3 years old. I think these are 22 months old. And this past week in ancient Shiloh, they had a special ceremony, a dinner, and the topic at the dinner was the discussion of I'm going to say temple era food. They talked about what grapes and grape products could you have at a temple banquet. And so everything there is really aimed at instituting temple worship again. Now, the importance of it is for the Jewish people because they would like to return to sacrifices again, and they'd like to do it on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, of course, is a controversial piece of real estate that everybody in the world claims, but the Jews have the best authority to it because if you go back all the way to Abraham, that's where Abraham offered up Isaac. And that's where Solomon built the temple, and that's where David offered up a sacrifice on the threshing floor of Ornan. So all those things are there on the Temple Mount. But in Shiloh, they're trying to mature these heifers. Then they will cremate one of them. They'll take the ashes, and the first thing they'll do is they'll purify a Sanhedrin. Then they purify a priesthood. And once the priesthood is purified, using these ashes and the purification process described in Numbers 19, now they'll begin animal sacrifice. That's important for us as Christians, not because we're going to get excited about the cremation of a red heifer, but the Bible clearly states that something's going to happen to give Israel permission to worship again. Daniel 9:27, Daniel chapter 8. And I think it will be the fact that they will grant them permission to begin worshiping on the Temple Mount. The Antichrist then, in the middle of the tribulation, stops the sacrifice. If he's going to stop it, it's got to start. And for over 1980 years, no sacrifice in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. And so this could be a big start for that.
Wow. All right, let's go to another topic here. This video I saw, and I sent it to you. I'm like, what is going on? Because I'm reading more and more reports online as well of Jews spitting on Christians, confronting Christians in Israel. I want to know what this is all about. Watch this video right here. Listen to this. Bring up the audio there, guys. Here we go. All right, so what was that all about, Dr. Lindsted?
Well, it's the conflict between, I'm going to say, the conservative Jews and Christians. We have the same God. We have part of the same Bible. We have our Old Testament is their Bible. We have a New Testament, which we believe to be divinely inspired, and we believe it to be an extension of the Old Testament, explaining the real message of redemption and salvation. But they would see that as a cult. So the truth is, this kind of conflict has been going on a long time. Go back to Acts chapter 5. And remember, in Acts chapter 5, in Jerusalem, I mean, we're talking the same city, maybe within a few feet of where that was filmed. Here's Peter, and he gets in trouble because he and the early disciples preached about repentance, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, and they were put in prison, and they said, you filled Jerusalem with this doctrine. And so they beat them, they put them in prison, and finally, here's the verdict of the early Christians. It's better to obey God than man. In other words, we know we run the risk of being in trouble. We're willing to do it because that's how important the message is. I think what's important to know is that in 1977, there was a clarification of a law. And at that point, it was determined that it is not illegal to proselytize. In other words, a cult can, a Christian can. Mormonism has been a major problem there in terms of I can say, being a nuisance to Jewish people. And they have a university there and some other study things there. And so all the religions of the world come together at Jerusalem. And so the Jewish people get tired of being picked on. They feel like everyone's out to convert them. Somehow people feel there's a special notch in their belt if they can convert a Jew. Don't get me wrong. I believe that we ought to share the message of salvation with Jews. So it's not illegal, but in that law, it's interesting because they say that you can't do it to children. And number two, you can't offer incentives or gifts. Now they would call that booklets and tracts. Have I ever given out booklets and tracts? The answer is yes. And there's some times when maybe where I've done it, and when I've done it, it's been unfortunate. But the truth is, we can share our faith. Next, you can always share your faith if somebody asks you, okay, what do you believe? And so I think, here's what I would say. Number one, there is the freedom. And let me go a step further. Do you know that just in March of 2023, this question was circled again? And they tried to pass a non-evangelization law for Israel, particularly for Jerusalem. It failed to pass. So it is legal. But I think what's happened is that sometimes people have used very poor taste, almost witnessing in a mad fashion. There's a great way to share Christ. One is to become a friend of a person. And you know what? As a friend, they'll invite you to their house. You can sit at a cafe outside. You can be in a hotel room. You can sit anywhere in public and share Christ, especially when they say, what do you believe? Or why do you believe that Jesus is the Messiah? And so now you can share with them passages in the Old Testament that show Jesus as the Messiah. Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and so on. You can go to completed prophecies and you can even point to things, archaeological things in their country, and these are proofs. So I don't mind when a person disagrees. Matter of fact, good friends can disagree. And I have friends in Israel. Some of them are Jews, some of them are Arabs. And as we talk about the Bible, as we talk about Jesus being the Messiah, we disagree. But we don't threaten each other's life. We each present our case. I try to convince them. I have people in Israel that some of their spouses are particularly angry with me because they feel like every time I'm with them, I'm trying to convert them. And the truth is, yes, I am. But do it in a reasonable manner. So you don't throw literature at them, hand it to them, build a friendship. And so there's a proper way to do it. But the zeal of sharing Christ is important, and we're to do it. It's a biblical command to
But
share
you know what
Christ.
I've noticed, and I agree with all that. What I've noticed, though, is some people in America using those clips and some of the stories about the conflicts, they're using it to sow seeds of anti-Semitism. I've seen it.
Yes, yeah, they are. And I think here's another thing that's just, it's almost shocking. So often what they do is they point to us as Christians saying, okay, the Nazis were Christians. And so one of the things you got to point out is, no, they were not true believers. They were not true followers of Christ. Okay, next, look at the large number of churches in the Western world. I'm talking the United States, I'm talking Canada, and they're actually Palestinian supporters. It's unbelievable.
So when the Jews over there see how much the evangelical world, who's being deceived by people like Bill Hybels' wife, remember her name? What was it? Lynn Hybels and Lynn Hybels and the Marxist, so-called Christian Marxist out of Chicago. What was his name? Wallace, Jim Wallace. They over there hear about them coming over there with the Christ at the checkpoint in Bethlehem there, all these American evangelicals, so-called, coming over there supporting the Palestinian Hamas lineup. No wonder they get a little leery of so-called Christians in America.
And I think there's yet another thing, and that is they see sometimes there's prominent churches well endowed with money, and they try to change history by buying sites and saying, okay, this is the site of the beheading of John the Baptist. This is another site of where Mary was born. I can take you to 4 churches where Mary was born. I can take you to 3 where she resurrected straight into heaven. And so these churches make false claims.
So they say.
Yeah, and so when the Jewish people see that Christians believe a lot of this nonsense, no wonder they're skeptical. But when you say, okay, let's
by the way, if they were to watch American Christian television where they're telling you to sow your faith seed and send me $1,000 and you'll get well and grow your leg out, no wonder they don't believe what a lot of so-called American Christians teach.
Yeah, that's right. We've left a sour grape. So sometimes we even say when we go there, we're believers. We're believers in Jesus Christ, as opposed to saying that we're a Christian, because immediately when you say a Christian, they associate you with the Crusaders, they associate you with the Roman Catholic Church. The persecution that the Roman Catholic Church has done against Jews is horrific.
Which includes the Vatican, even the History Channel, I think, has reported on this. The Vatican and the rat lines, where the Vatican took a lot of the Nazis and the rat lines and put them down in South America.
So you can see why they're skeptical.
Yes.
But I think what we do is we do our homework, we try to do it properly. And the other thing, they're always amazed when we come there and we know some of their history. Number 2, we know the Bible, we know the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. And then when we go to some of the historical sites, like Shiloh, for example, and we say, wow, this is so incredible because this demonstrates the ownership of this particular place. It's Jewish. And so when they see that we're siding with that, and when they see the arguments, let me tell you, it builds a relationship. And now you have your opportunity to go a step further and say, this all points to Christ. What was the point of the tabernacle? It was God dwelling among us. And so then you say, and guess what? It became a human form, and that human form was Jesus. And and this is the seed of a woman that was promised all the way back, and this is why the virgin birth is important. And so when you begin to connect together the Old Testament and the New Testament, all of a sudden you find that they are interested in listening to the message. And so, happily to say, there are a number of Jews that are coming to Christ, and it's exciting to see. But also, in the middle of Israel, there are also a number of Islamic or Muslim people that when you sit down with them individually, great opportunity to share Christ. Great opportunity to say, wow, compare this hope that we have compared to what you have. And say, hey, look at the signs the Bible indicates. You're living in these signs. And so we have our opportunity. We just have to be wise in how we do it. And boy, to me, this is the wonderful thing about being alive today. We have a chance really to be a watchman on the wall. We have a chance to be a testimony for Christ, and we get to go back. The early disciples, they were told to leave Jerusalem, go to Judea, Samaria, and the rest of the world. We're in the rest of the world. Now we're going back to Samaria, Judea, and Jerusalem to bring the gospel back to them.
Absolutely.